Goeienaand. Good evening, fellow South Africans and citizens of the world. Now, it's very interesting that Cyril Ramaphosa has suggested that within a generation there will be no poverty in South Africa. And I say that because it's exactly a generation ago that Australian Prime Minister Bob Hawke made this promise.
By 1990, no Australian child will be living in poverty.
Okay, so Bob Hawke said that by 1990, no child in Australia will be living in poverty. And that was a promise, okay? In his first address as the fifth president of South Africa, President Cyril Ramaphosa made ambitious promises to solve some of the most pressing problems facing the country, including joblessness and poverty. Ramaphosa was sworn in as president at the Loftus Versfeld Stadium in Tshwane today, where he took his oath of office during his inauguration, to the cheers of those in the stadium. He promised to uphold the Constitution. Ramaphosa highlighted poverty as an issue to be dealt with now. Today, let us declare before the esteemed witnesses gathered here that such a South Africa is indeed possible. And Ramaphosa goes on to say, let us declare our shared determination that we shall end poverty in South Africa within a generation. Now, what is so interesting about all this is that he is a known porky pie. I'm going to play you now a short video clip which was taken in the Australian Parliament in 1990, where the coalition raised a question to Bob Hawke about why he failed to take all children out of poverty by 1990.
The Honourable Member for Aston.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question without notice is directed to the Prime Minister. I refer the Prime Minister to the 1987 Governor-General's address, which contained the commitment that, quote, by 1990 no child will live in poverty, unquote. As it's widely conceded by groups such as ACOS that in 1990 there are still 500,000 children living in poverty, can the Prime Minister explain why no mention of child poverty was contained in Tuesday's address by the Governor-General?
The Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, this particular novelty, as the Treasurer has indicated behind me, has had a very long run now over the last 12 months and during the last election. And if you have any interest in it and you're mentioning organisations, may I refer you to these. I refer you to the statement of the Brotherhood of St Lawrence and of its then director, Bishop Hollingworth, that the promise that had been made by the government through the Prime Minister that by 1990 there'd be no financial need for any child to live in poverty, well, you
Order.
see, he also said, may I say, Mr Speaker, that the same gentleman, Mr Speaker, may I say, Bishop Hollingworth, also castigated the opposition. At no point was there a castigation of the government. The only castigation of any political party by Bishop Hollingworth was the opposition, who said that they should stop their insane attempt to misrepresent this position and recognise the enormous achievement of the government
Now
in this area.
compare Australia, which is basically one of the safest countries in the world to live in, and there's very little crime, although it does exist. And you've got a standard of living amongst the general population which is far higher than that in South Africa today. And in South Africa, you have a depressed economy, 10 million people unemployed, and the country facing a crime and corruption crisis. How is he going to change that in a generation if Australia couldn't? The reality is that today in Australia, exactly a generation after those wild claims by Bob Hawke, Australia has experienced 20 years of sustained economic growth and is one of the wealthiest countries in the world. Despite our wealth, the latest ACOS Poverty in Australia report found of the 3 million people living in poverty in Australia, 731,000 are children, representing 1 in 6 or 17% of children under the age of 15. This figure has increased by 2 percentage points over the past 10 years. Single-parent families locked out of paid work are at particularly high risk of poverty. 40% of all children on poverty in Australia live in a single-parent household. Now, if you compare the two countries, South Africa is imploding, Australia is stable. And even despite it being stable and growing dramatically over the entire period following Bob Hawke's famous statement, we now have nearly 1 million children in Australia living in poverty. Now, I would say that poverty is not as abject as it is in South Africa, which actually makes it harder for Ramaphosa to do what he's trying to promise in his inaugural speech. Anyway, I thought I'd just bring that information up for you because it's a nice comparison when you look a generation later of a stable country and, it's not looking good for South Africa. Please remember to subscribe to be kept informed, ring the bell for the updates, and have a great evening. Bye.